I want to introduce Brett Cohen, who's the CEO of IPG. Is it your CEO? Managing Director? No, CEO. IPG, the International Parking Group, we've had a long relationship with. I think goes back to my early days working with the Metro Parking team and IPG back when, was it JF? What was the name of the management company?
JF Infrastructure?
JF Infrastructure, I think, part of the Mirvac group, I think, at the time. And then more recently, we've obviously done a project up at Sand Hospital with Tony and the team, with Wilson Parking as well, up there managing that site. IPG run how many hospitals, car parks?
8 sites.
Eight locations, and it's a unique model, and I think it's worthwhile hearing about, especially as we go through some of the challenges we're definitely seeing in Victoria around budgets and funding. I think you'll find that the IPG model has a real opportunity to maybe get some car park occupancy in areas that or capacity in areas that it's needed. So I'll let Brett take us through what IPG do.
All right, good afternoon everyone. Thanks very much, Maz, for putting on this great event and having us be a part of it. A big thank you for giving me the graveyard shift directly after lunch. I really appreciate that. I was just contemplating during the lunchtime how it was that I landed up in my life on a podium at a CarPark conference speaking. It's not something I ever thought I'd do. So I started off life as an actuary. Studied actuarial science and qualified at university. Then I saw the light. The joke at university was, how do you know the difference between an accountant and an actuary? So an accountant looks at your shoes when he's talking to you, and an actuary looks at his own shoes when he's talking to you. So moved across into investment banking, worked for a South African investment bank in their infrastructure, financing and development franchise, and then joined IPG, which is a specialist car park infrastructure business. So I wanted to spend a little time over the next 20 minutes just explaining who IPG is, what our model is. Apologies, I know it's just after lunch and that might feel a little bit like a university lecture. I will try and keep it high level and focus on the outcomes we deliver for our clients, and then speak through a couple of case studies. So I know not everybody in the room is asset owners, so it's not necessarily directly relevant to you, but many of you are involved in trying to sell product, services, technology, equipment to asset owners who many of them are budget constrained. I can talk through one of the examples in the case studies we speak to, so I think it's good to be aware of IPG's model, what we do, and you can always feel free to introduce us to one of your potential clients if budget is holding them back from moving ahead. Let's see if I can figure this out, go forward. All right, so IPG, who we are. So the way I define us is we're a specialist infrastructure developer and owner, focused exclusively at the moment on hospital car parks. I'll speak about why that is in a minute. We're owned by local infrastructure funds and investors, a fund called Igneo Infrastructure Funds, which is very well known for those in the space, infrastructure fund that invests across a wide range of assets. IPG is one of their portfolio companies, and Prime Super, which is a local pension fund. We sit in their direct infrastructure platform. So effectively, infrastructure fund money goes into IPG. We've deployed over $500 million worth of capital in car parking infrastructure. So next after state governments, I would say within Australia, IPG's got the most experience in terms of developing and delivering car parking infrastructure and managing it on an ongoing basis. So as I mentioned, we're active in 8 sites across Australia. We service 5 major public hospitals and 1 large private hospital, the Sand in New South Wales, which Dale mentioned earlier. It's just over 12,000 bays at the moment, the portfolio. So it's a reasonably sizable portfolio for a private company to be looking after. One important thing to understand about IPG is we're not a car park operator. People often get this confused when they speak to us. We're an infrastructure developer and owner. So we don't do any of the day-to-day operations. We leave that to the professionals. And we've worked with a range of operators. At the moment, Wilson Parking looks after most of our sites in Australia. One site is operated by Cornerstone Parking, but we've worked previously with Point Parking. As Mostyn mentioned, Metro Parking was involved. And we're really operator agnostic to some extent. So we do see a wide range of what goes on in the market. I'll just mention our head office is in Melbourne. We actually don't have any assets in Melbourne, which is a bit of a quirk of history, which I won't go into. But the reason we don't have any assets in Victoria is because the Victorian government has never privatised car parking. That's always something that they've wanted to hold on to. We do hear that that's changing, and obviously with the structural deficits that we know we're all facing in the state, states are looking at ways to do things smarter. So I hope that that will change in the near future. All right, so our model, our funding model is affectionately called in the infrastructure community a boot model. I should say the infrastructure community is a very small, tight-knit community. Like there were 2 or 3 firms that did this early on, and then people sort of spawned and filtered out of that. When I joined car parking, I figured out you guys are even more tight-knit and incestuous than infrastructure. And my favorite game now is trying to work out how everyone used to work for Wilson Parking at some point.
Is there a quiz at the end of the day for that?
Yeah, exactly.
There is.
All right, so the boot model, I'll just keep this light, stands for build, own, operate, and transfer. So the first stage is build. We might be engaged either by a state government, a Department of Health, or by a private hospital operator. It could be any land owner or infrastructure owner. The private entity is responsible for designing and building the infrastructure at their own risk, as well as financing the construction of that infrastructure. The OO of boot stands for own and operate. We own it in a legal sense, usually through a lease or a license, so we don't own the underlying land. And then we operate it for the term of their concession period. Usually our leases are around 20 to 40 years, to give you a rough idea of how long we own and operate for. So in the case of car parks, this model is used across a range of different infrastructure. In the case of car parks, the way it works is we will operate the car park, we appoint an operator, we will set the fees usually in line with the lease and collect revenue from staff, visitors, other punters who use in the car park. That forms our revenue. We use that to pay expenses, maintain the car park, replace equipment, life cycle capex, and then eventually pay our debt and our shareholders, and then hand back the asset at the end, which is the 4th stage, which is transfer. So that's an important point, that at the end of the lease term, 25 years, we'll hand back the asset with the keys to the original owner. They maintain ownership of the land for the entire time that the boot is in place. And the lease will usually have quite strict handback provisions, so we make sure that they're getting a nice, it's not a brand new asset obviously, but a well-maintained asset for its age that they can continue operating. We've actually gone through that process with a few of the older assets in the IPG portfolio, handed them back to government. It's been very smooth, and in fact government in most cases just carried on using the operator that IPG was using. So for those using the car park, the staff, visitors, patients, they would have noticed no difference the day before and after it handed back. Okay, so why would people do this? So the first is, and the most important, is that it releases capital. So capital which would have had to been deployed in building this infrastructure, maintaining this infrastructure, can be taken by hospital operators, the Department of Health, and used for core health service delivery, develop a core healthcare infrastructure, getting back to what they're meant to be doing rather than car parking, which is at best neutral and at worst a problem, as Mark and I were discussing at the tea break for some of these owners. The They also get to leverage private sector know-how, particularly for smaller sites and operators or asset owners. We've got 12,000 bays, as I said. We're across Australia. We're seeing all the best and latest technology, and we're able to bring that to bear at a site for the owner and bring the best experience to that site. Risk transfer, so this is a bit meaningless for non-finance people, but it's off balance. This is not a lending product. It's off balance sheet. There's no risk associated with it for the asset owner. So all the risk is transferred to IPG to build, operate, and maintain that car park. And the last one, I think, is a very important one, is transforming parking, this way we like to describe it, from a cost center into a profit center. So the way a lot of hospital operators will think about their car parking is, how can we cover the costs and maybe make a bit of a profit, but it's not viewed as a primary profit center. Whereas the way we approach car parks in our portfolios, we view that as a primary profit center, which means when we take over a parking asset, even if it's an existing operating asset, usually we can raise revenue, putting aside prices, raise revenue 10+%, just through tightening up the way it's operated.
How about SAN?
SAN, well, I'll speak about that. I will speak about that and that's actually been a great outcome for them. They're really happy with it. Why healthcare car parks? So this is important to understand. So the reason we like these car parks is because they're what we call destination car parks. People are coming to us. We're not fighting for volume and competing for traffic like you would in a CBD car park. There's a hospital there that's an underlying service that's driving traffic to the site. We usually control all of the car parking on the site, and that means that the revenues are a lot more predictable and defensive, which is the type of revenues that our shareholders like. So we have looked at other similar style investments, and I was discussing some with Mike earlier, but and we have with Mostyn as well. University campuses is another one where it'd be a very similar sort of thing, a campus style where there's an underlying service being offered that's pulling people there. Airports, if we could ever get our hands on one of those, would be fantastic. Entertainment venues like Marvel also would be of interest. So we are looking to deploy the model elsewhere. Okay, that slide's a bit dense. Maybe just to pick out a few of the key things that we think our model offers. One of the things that I always get asked about is car park fees. So a hospital is a sensitive environment. There's a lot of users who require discounted parking, concessional parking, and certainly they don't want to get into a position where a private operator comes in and lifts prices and they have issues with their staff or people avoiding getting healthcare because they can't afford the car parking. So we generally are led by the asset owner on car park pricing. We'll give them advice, but in the end of the day, that's a decision for them to make and implement, and that gets baked into our lease terms and usually just escalates at CPI. So there's no risk for them that car park pricing will be used as a tool by us to extract extra profits. Ownership of the underlying land is particularly important, and we'll speak about SAN, but a lot of the not-for-profit faith-based groups are big landowners, as people would know. They're also private hospital operators, and ownership of land over the long term for those sorts of groups is often seen as part of mission, and they don't like to sell land. So our model works really well for those sorts of groups because they're able to keep the long-term land ownership. We've got strong shareholders with deep pockets. We want to build our portfolio and grow. So another benefit of introducing IPG is that as master planning and development of precincts evolves over time, you have a partner with deep pockets who wants to build more car parking. So instead of car parking availability being a handbrake on future healthcare development at a precinct, which is the case at a number of precincts where we're operating, the government wants to expand, but there's not enough money to fund new car parking and can't do it without new car parking. So having IPG involved is a way to release that handbrake. Yeah, we're sensitive to the needs of different users. We exclusively do healthcare car parks, as I said, and we understand that there are users of these sites who have their own specific needs. Some of them need discounted car parking, like staff, critically ill patients, lower demographic users of the car park. Some just need special treatment, like the doctors. They often, ironically, they get free parking in a lot of the hospitals.
Doctor secondaries.
Sorry?
Doctor secondary.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But we understand that. Another thing that I think is a big selling point for us is that we take the emotion out of parking. So this was a big point in the sand transaction, and it's a feature of a lot of sites, is that car parking, as everybody knows who works in this industry, that's one of those services that people feel they don't need to pay for if they can find a way to get away with not paying for it. That you almost don't feel guilty about it. And hospitals, because you have so many different user groups, many of whom are needy, over time, it's easier for the hospital management and the people looking after those sites to turn a blind eye to certain leakage that's going on. When you bring in someone like RPG, it's easy to just blame. We've got a new private operator, we're tightening up things here, and we need to look after everybody in a fair way. So I think it takes the emotion out of it, which is a big factor. All right, some of the key factors that we have to consider when you want to deploy one of these models. The number one, I would say, is feasibility versus affordability. In many sites, I guess, the rates that are charged to people who use hospital car parks, even though sometimes we might feel are very expensive, are below what is needed to make that asset economically feasible. So there's a bit of a journey and a balance to be found between making it feasible to bring in private sector capital and actually earn a return on the funding versus affordability. So there is a bit of a journey to go on there. Access for special need user groups. That's my recommendation always when we're dealing with our clients, is that always needs to be set in stone and understood clearly by everybody at the outset of a transaction. So the worst thing is to have a surprise and a group that turns up that needs special access to the car parking but wasn't baked into the deal.
It's the triple P acronym again.
Oh, sorry, that's public-private projects, partnerships. So I guess in public sector parlance, that's probably what you'd use. But so I've used it a bit interchangeably. Interaction with existing on-site car parking. So that is another big factor. If you want to build a new multi-deck at your site, but you've got a whole lot of at-grade car parking, introducing a private sector operator for that new multi-deck, or owner-operator for that new multi-deck, is probably not going to work unless you're willing to put the at-grade car parking in as well. So having two operators competing against each other on a site is not going to work. Flexibility required in relation to future development and master planning. This is something that I spend a lot of time dealing with the clients that we deal with, because one of the things they're worried about is I'm entering into a 30-year lease with IPG. We've got a whole lot of at-grade car parking spread around our campus, but we also know we want to build a new mental health hospital here and a specialist surgeons unit here, and that's going to be on the at-grade car parking. So how do we deal with that? So we've come up with mechanisms and ways to offer our clients flexibility to be able to take back that space over time if and when they need to. So that's a critical part of our model. Operational KPIs and abatements is just how do you keep the private sector honest and making sure that we're looking after your asset in the proper way and operating it in a way that doesn't tarnish the reputation of the hospital or attract media attention. It is a sensitive area, hospital car parking. So you need to have control over that. Long-term facilities management, they're not very complicated car parks, as people would know. There's some line marking, lighting, services, lifts, that's about it. It's not a hospital. And then the scale of opportunity. So often people ask me how big a car park do you need in order to deploy this model? So one of the things is this model is it's quite complex. There's a lot of upfront due diligence, legal costs associated with putting in place one of these transactions. So not all car parks are equal, but I'd say probably like 500 bays, a value of around maybe 20 to 30 million would be the limit, the bottom limit of where RPG would get interesting we're interested in that sort of asset. So, for like a 30-bay car park outside a medical center, that's not going to be of interest. Just to give you an example, when I say leveraging the IPG portfolio, I do see this getting more and more powerful over time. So we have gone through the process of building our own data dashboards and collecting data from across our portfolio so that we can manage the trends and optimize the assets and the sites and keep our operators honest. So we're getting the best out of your assets as we're working them. We work with multiple tech and operating partners, obviously some of whom are in this room, some of whom are not. But we're getting really to see, I think, the best of what's available out there, and we can really, it's horses for courses, we can bring the best solution to the site for the client to solve their particular problems. And there's a lot of sharing of information that's happening within our team, obviously nothing confidential, but we're cognizant of this and making sure we're leveraging the portfolio to get the best outcome across our portfolio. All right, case studies.
Sorry.
That's all right. Is that the 5-minute warning? All right. My quickly run through some case studies. QE2 was a site that was originally developed by another infrastructure company called Capella Car Parking in 2011 after winning a tender run by the WA government. It's 5,300 bays. IPG acquired it in 2019. It's got a large multi-deck and a couple of thousand at-grade bays. Since acquiring it, this is one of the benefits, I think, of IPG's model, is that we see ourselves as a long-term partner. So we're not just there to make top money. Of course, we want to maximize returns for our investors, but we also want to be viewed as a partner and invest back into the site. So since taking it over, we put LEDs throughout the car park. We've installed those solar panels, as you can see, which is fully powering the car park and all the retail tenancies inside the car park. We've installed some EV bays, and we're going through a process now, helped by CK, to completely replace all of the car parking equipment with LPR technology and a staff permitting system. And not all of that would necessarily generate an ROI that satisfies our investors, but we see it as investing in the relationship with the state, and hopefully that opens up other opportunities for us. The San Hospital I've been referred to as a few times. So the Seventh-day Adventists in Sydney are a large conglomerate. One of their assets is the New South Wales' largest private hospital in Ku-ring-gai. They're also a large landowner around the hospital, so very land rich, but not necessarily generating huge operating profits out of the hospital. So they were trying to work out how to get the best out of the hospital. The hospital needs some refurbishment, expansion, redevelopment. Where's the capital for that going to come from? So they looked at models where they could sell off some of the land, sell off the hospital infrastructure and lease it back. But in the end, I think what really got IPG the gig was that they got to control the long-term land ownership. They have complete flexibility about that. We formed a relationship with them because we bought a small car park they developed across the road underneath a medical center. And I think they saw the benefits of a partnership with IPG. So we've entered into a long-term 30-year lease with them for all the car parking at that site. We paid them a bunch of money up front. There we didn't build anything. They had built it already, so we were just effectively like refunding their costs. And then they are now using that money to develop the site, refurbish some of the units within the site, etc. We're going through now a process of replacing all of the legacy equipment. It's probably 15 years old. This was a classic case of where budget was constraining car parking. They knew they had to do it. Mike had provided them a glossy report, but they just did not have any budget to be able to replace the equipment, and it was literally falling to pieces. So,
is there any substance in that report? There's any substance.
So we're putting parquet technology in there. This will be the first time that we're using parquet technology, so we're quite excited about that, as well as deploying UbiPark, which is also our first time working with UbiPark. And I'll just finish off with one more example example of what's going on. This is current live. New Zealand Health has announced that they are running a major program to refurbish and redevelop some of their hospitals. As part of that, there's 13 sites which have been earmarked for additional car parking, and they're planning to procure private sector financing and operations of those car parks. So it's an opportunity we're super excited about. It's an example of a government that's budget constrained, needs to deliver infrastructure, and sees the benefits of bringing in a private sector party that can do it on an off-balance sheet basis. So they're very excited to have IPG come over because of our experience in the Australian market. And yeah, that's it.
Great. Have we got any questions for Brett?
How does the business development process go? So I'm sure if you move to ask any hospital, they're going to say we don't have enough staff. And you cut down opportunities.
Slowly. You have to have a lot of patience. Like our deal, I would say the SAN, for example, that was probably a 3-year process to get them to that point. So although they have not enough parking and no budget to develop more car parking, many asset owners feel that it's essential that we own and control the car parking. So it's a process of working through it with them and showing them you're not going to lose a lot in terms of control, but look at what the advantages you'll gain. So we have made a distinct decision to focus on private hospital operators. We think that with the dislocation going on in that market, there's more opportunity for us now. And there's not a lot of them, to be honest. There's like 8 or 10 major groups. So we're just trying to form relationships with them, and then on an opportunistic basis, when they need the capital, they know who to call.
Is it?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? When you take over, and I'm sure that in most cases the revenue goes up because it was previously run by the security company or something like that, and so they would, someone would press intercom, the gate pops open. We've all seen that if you've been in the parking industry. You do profit shares, so if your profit goes up, doubles, for example, I don't know what the margins are like, but do you share that back with the owners?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an important part of our model. So we're not looking to make like private equity style returns. We're an infrastructure investor. We earn relatively like low double-digit returns, to give you an idea, geared returns. And we're not looking to make supernormal profits. So we always are willing to share back with the landowner those supernormal profits. So often it'll be anywhere between, I'd say, 30 and 50% of revenue will get shared back once it's above the base case that we assumed for the asset. So SAN, in the case of SAN, there was a lot of excess revenue, and it's actually turned out fantastically for them because they were not expecting anything beyond the initial check they got up front, and they're actually landing up getting quite substantial annual payments because of the revenue share. So it really is a win-win.
I remember being in the security control room with Mike and Steve as they started to go through the audit.
That might have been a little bit of it.
You reckon?
Well, the first time I was there, the guy in the security office just wanted to show me his toy, how you could like open the gate remotely. But he was so proud of it. But while I was there for like 10 minutes, I think it rang 15 times and they just opened the gate. So.
He seemed to be the most popular bloke on the campus. Any other questions? Jen? Oh, sorry, Fez.
When you see that return, if you look at your profits going up,
Yes.
in terms of timeline, if you take a couple of years before you actually start to return, because you probably have initial cost.
Yeah, so we're IRR investors, so I guess we're trying to earn a return over the full 30 years. So when we get our capital back, would probably be, depends how long the lease is. Say for a 30-year lease, maybe halfway through we'd get our capital back, and then the back end we're earning our return.
I think I could probably add some value to that, Fez. So in the parking industry, the operators are usually short-term, and they're looking at things over 2 or 3 years. So what's been great to, in the early days dealing with Metro Parking and IPGs, it's a 30-year. So they'll make decisions, and I remember working with Matt at VCCC, and the builder gets a spec, and it's all about ripping everything out so it can be a cost. Then they hand it over to someone like Matt to run, and there's nothing in it that actually works. When you work with IPG and It's a focus on what can we do over 30 years that benefits the site. Can I spend $10 now to save, I'll spend $1 now to save $10 in 10 years' time, which is a little bit unique in our industry. Jen.
Thinking about a customer experience aspect, I'd be interested to hear what you observe as feedback through those sites, what sort of benefits are that customers experience once you set up.
I think for us, it's a hospital site, so they're all manned full time, or for most of the operating hours of the car park. So for us, the face of the person in that side office is the most critical. And when we have the right person in the side office, we get excellent feedback. So at San, we were lucky enough to pick up a guy who actually didn't have a lot of car parking experience, but he's just an excellent people's person. He deals very well with the staff. A lot of the clientele at hospitals are elderly, obviously, who just need a bit more of the high-touch style care than like a CBD type car park.
So that's not Tony then.
Tony's, he does sometimes stand by the boom gates. Yeah, but no, generally I would say we get really good feedback. And if anything, sometimes Tony and I, the battle for Tony and I is making sure our operators also have an eye on profit and not just keeping everybody happy, because it's a hospital environment and naturally you want to keep people happy.
Definitely the most challenging environment in the industry would be the hospitals. Like, no one's in there usually for a good reason, right?
No, yeah.
Yep.
With all the technology that we've been exposed to today, does it seem within IPG that manning, like staffing car parks, is a step backwards and not a step forwards? Because as the overseer of a car park, we're trying to step away from being manned.
Yeah.
And be remote access supported by our provider.
Yep.
I just see staffing as a step backwards, not forwards.
I agree with you. I'd love to see it get to the point where it's not staffed. It's our biggest cost, but we're not there yet. And hospitals are very slow adopters. I would say they're going to be like everybody's going cashless. We've still got cash. The start, just to give you an idea, a large proportion of the time that's spent by the staff on site is dealing with hospital staff and the paperwork associated with the permitting. So we do see opportunities.
Paperwork?
Yeah, well, exactly. Introducing things like UbiCollaborate we see as very low-hanging fruit to be able to reduce the amount of staff. But I think going fully remote monitoring for a hospital, I think a lot of our clients would see that as a negative. So I can't see that happening in the near future.
The operations, remote. They're not sitting in booths at the exit type scenario. So it's just they've got someone on site that the staff can talk to.
Yeah, sorry. They're not at the boom gates, but there is an on-site office. Yeah.
Any other questions? Does this New Zealand model going to work in Australia? Or could it be taken on?
Absolutely, it could be. I mean, historically, we've had Labour governments the last sort of 5 or 10 years, which I think has meant there's a bit of resistance to working with the private sector. But as governments are under more strain, I think people are starting to think about ways to use balance sheets more effectively, and our model is definitely an opportunity to do that.
Great. Let's thank Brett for a great speech.